Hello there, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be looking at the classic Jimmy Wang Yu vehicle One Arm Boxer, released by Eureka Entertainment. I believe this film was made in 1971, directed by and starring, obviously, Jimmy Wang Yu. It's easy to get a lot of the Jimmy Wang Yu films confused. Some of the titles, especially if you're not familiar with sort of his work or some of the films he's done, because you've got One Arm Swordsman, done by Chang Chi, you've also got One Arm Boxer, and then there's Chinese Boxer. So it can get a bit confusing in regards to Jimmy Wang Yu films, but I say we're looking at One Arm Boxer today, just to make that clear. It's One Arm Boxer. The sequel to this film is probably most widely known than this film, Master of the Flying Guillotine, but we'll be talking about the One Arm Boxer today, the original one. Hopefully they might release Eureka might pick up the rights to distribute the sequel, which I think is the one most people have seen, more so than the original. We'll be getting into the One Arm Boxer today. Regarding Jimmy Wang Yu, I mean, he was a big deal in regards to kung fu movies. He was a huge, his career burned, quite bright, quite quickly, but he didn't. After a while, he didn't necessarily get the roles, unfortunately, but he was the biggest. I mean, he was a top draw. He was a top big kung fu. He was probably one of the best, the most popular kung fu stars of the time. He was, like I say, a real big deal in the world of kung fu movies, and it was his film, The Chinese Boxer, that really changed all that. Because up to around that point, many martial arts films, many of the films being made were very much sort of sword play, that kind of thing. It was usually involving weapons, usually swords. With the film like sort of The Chinese Boxer and sort of that Jimmy Wang Yu, and then of course Bruce Lee, it become more about hand-to-hand combat. Become more about kung fu, sort of martial arts done with just, like I say, just feet and legs and just hand-to-hand combat. Many consider Chinese Boxer to be the first real kung fu movie. That's usually often what people say, that's where it all started. And it had, like I say, had a huge impact that was just rooted in hand-to-hand combat, which is ironic, because regarding Jimmy Wang Yu, he was not a kung fu guy. That's the biggest. I mean, he was, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, kung fu star of the time. He was definitely, one of the forerunners that really got the boom going, and I think that's why a lot of people have such, why Jimmy Wang Yu is so regarded. But it's so ironic, because he was not a kung fu trained, he wasn't trained in kung fu, he wasn't a martial artist. So it's very interesting that somebody with sort of no sort of fighting experience. I think he was more interested, I did read somewhere, in playing water polo and things like that, and swimming, rather than actually sort of kung fu. So basically the whole film starts in a Chinese restaurant, where this member of the Hook Gang, so already with the Hook Gang, you probably get an idea they're going to be the villains of the film. He walks in, and this guy walks in from the Hook Gang, and he claims that some innocent people, they're sat at his table. Right, so this is basically this starts off the whole film. Just somebody walks in, you are sat at my table. That is the bulk of what this whole argument and ruckus that ensues is all about. So basically, Wang Yu comes to their rescue and asks for a showdown in the mountains to settle this. Of course, Wang Yu and his crew, they beat the living crap out of them, but Wang Yu sort of gets in trouble for it by his master, explaining you're not showing constraint, you're too angry, you're so willing to get just hot-headed, you just want to fight straight away. And he's told to clean the altar for 3 days, he's told to kneel for 1, and he's got to be struck for 3 times. The Hook Gang are bad, you see. They have involvement in prostitution and opium, just to make sure it's clear that they are bad. They're the villains, okay? So it wasn't obvious enough. Then the Marshal of the Hook Gang basically returns to wreak havoc, right? But he basically just returns to just mess them up. He returns to, as the guy who was claiming these guys are sat at their table. He was saying, "Oh, Wang Yu's been bad mouthing you, saying you're no good." He basically comes back. He goes to Wang Yu school, where a fight breaks out. They're using hooks. I mean, they're using hooks against unarmed students, which I think is a bit unfair. It's not even a fair fight. I mean, they've got weapons and everything. They've got, they've got these metal, great big hooks. So it is a bit sort of unfair. And I'd never understood with this kung fu. I mean, maybe I'm not remembering that right, but I do recall, in their in their dojo, in their school, they don't even have any weapons on the wall that they can grab. They just like settle for just dealing with them in hand-to-hand combat. So fight breaks out, hooks are used, and it does seem a bit unfair. And basically, they get beaten again, even unarmed. They still trash this school. So you'd think after 2 beatings, maybe we should just leave it. Look, I apologise. I shouldn't have kicked them guys out of out of that table. But it's a kung fu movie. It's not going to stop there. So that's, like I say, that's 2 or 3 times they get beaten in the restaurant. I think then they get beaten in the mountains. Then they get beaten again at Jimmy Wang Yu's school. So they've had their asses handed to them at least two or three times at this point. And so basically what they do is the master of the Hook Gang school, he decides to recruit fighters from sort of other countries. He decides to find and recruit people that have different fighting styles that can compete with Jimmy Wang Yu and his friends. And so you got karate, we got judo, we got taekwondo, we got yoga, we got boxers from Thailand, we got lamas from Tibet. So they return, and we get to see each of these fighters one by one show off their skills. They go back to Jimmy Wang Yu's school, and you got like Tibetan monks, as I say, in there, and they all stand in a line, and they're like cartoon characters, and that's what's so fun about this film. It's violent, it is gory, but they take the kung fu element and these people with different styles, like so far they're exaggerated, is what I mean, and that's what I love about this film. And so we've got all these different styles. So they return. We get to see each of these fighters show off their skills. Jimmy Wang Yu gets his arm chopped off in sort of the ruckus because they're having sort of one-on-one battles, and Jimmy Wang Yu ends up getting his arms chopped off, quite literally chopped off. Just somebody, and then the whole arm comes off. So Jimmy basically crawls away after this whole school is wiped out, and he's discovered by this father and daughter who nurse him back to health, and he has to learn the crippled fist is the style that he's learning. What I like about this film, the camera does move in the fight scene. It might be just on like a dolly, like one of them sort of where it's just moved along, but it's not just a static camera. Jimmy Wang Yu is moving the camera around. He's not just saying, well, put the camera there, let's shoot that. If you look at a lot of the scenes, especially early on when there's a lot of people in the middle of the fight, the camera is moving. It does make the action seem a lot more kinetic, a lot more fast. The fact the camera's moving along with the people in the fight scenes, it isn't just, like I say, a static camera. This is a kung fu movie in every sense of the word. This is a kung fu movie as you would expect a kung fu movie to be. It's violent, it's funny, it's gory, it's, there's so much going on with this. Plot is simple, bad guy is evil, and lots of kung fu fights. I mean, it's all there. It's all there, and that's all you really need for the basis of a good kung fu movie. And it's not just one-on-one either, the fights. There's, like I say, a lot of times it's mass brawls. There's more than one person in the fight scenes. That's why the camera does move around, so you are getting to see everybody and like the mass action that's taking place. This film in many ways, and much like March of the Flying Guillotine after it, the kung fu experts in this, like I said, they're very much like cartoon quality to them. They do have that cartoon quality sort of aesthetic where it is a bit wacky, it is a bit zany. You can sort of laugh at some of the special skills of the kung fu masters. Like, for example, the Japanese master, the main Japanese villain, he's got like the biggest fangs I've ever seen. He's got like these great big like leopard fangs. Why? No idea. Does he ever use them? I don't think so, but it's just to give the character more of a, like I say, a cartoonish evil personality, that he's just got these big fangs for whatever reason. The yoga guy's special move is to do like a handstand and then just sort of go around in circles really quickly and just sort of dizzy the opponent. That's sort of his special move. That's what he does. Around the Tibetan, like the people from Tibet, the monks from Tibet, they can make their bodies sort of expand, so they're sort of if you imagine, if you've ever seen like sort of the end of Big Trouble in Little China, it's sort of like that. Like they can just make their bodies sort of blow up. What these characters do, other than make the film fun though, is they give it scope. They don't just have kung fu, rather than just being traditional kung fu fighters all the time. Jimmy Wang Yu is like, right, well, let's make a fighter from India. Let's have like Thai boxers. Let's have, just mix. Let's have judo. Let's put in different elements in there, different styles, which does really does, I'd say, gives the film a bit more of a vast array when it comes to styles and what you do see on camera, rather than just like so many kung fu films, especially the generic ones. It is literally just standard kung fu fights after kung fu fight with nothing really standing out or popping out in front of the camera. This film, it definitely does. You will remember every sort of encounter and every sort of character from, especially the enemy camp. You will remember them all. But I'd say Jimmy Wang Yu's school gets completely wiped out, gets totally annihilated, and he manages to crawl away. And like I say, he has to learn this new style. And one thing you will notice about this film when you watch it is it uses the Shaft theme song by Isaac Hayes. That is the first thing I noticed when I saw this for the first time. Like, okay, they've just pinched Isaac Hayes' Shaft theme song. Kung Fu movies often borrowed soundtracks. There's a lot of, I think Magnificent Bodyguards with Jackie Chan has some of the Star Wars music ripped off. I haven't seen Magnificent Bodyguards for a while, but if I recall, it did. And there's a lot of Kung Fu movies that did, like I say, rip soundtracks from Hollywood movies or American movies back in the day. And, you know, and just to think, all this whole film, that everything that happens in the film is school getting wiped out, everything. This is just because somebody said, "You're at my table." Just because some innocent guy sat at the wrong table, it just caused this whole ruckus, this whole mess. You know, what are the odds, huh? What are the odds? What is a very interesting aspect of the film that is unlike other kung fu movies, maybe from Shaw Brothers, where you would see like the whole training sequence, you would see the guy with his sifu, with his master, learning the new style. You would see, sort of him, like after he's got beat during halfway through the film, his recovery. They would draw it out, and I'll protect, nurse it back to health, like getting back to health. Here, what Jimmy Wang Yu does, which I think is very interesting, he just tells it through snapshots. Rather than waste your time as an audience viewer, when he gets discovered by the father and daughter, who sort of, they have knowledge in medicine and they nurse him back to health. It's all done in snapshots. So he goes from being nearly beaten to death, and then you have about 10 or so photos, and then he's back. He's healthy again. He doesn't waste any time. It's like he knows you want to get to the next fight. Let's not waste any time. Let's go on with it. The only snag with that is it just loses all context and the relationship with the master, and just like his recovery and the dynamic he had with the daughter as well. But it's a really interesting, it doesn't stop. And that's that's not really done that often in these sort of kung fu movies. Obviously there is that notion of revenge here, kind of contrast here is learning like the crippled fist. I mean, he is in agony. He has to learn that the way he has to go about it is quite painful. He's putting his hands into hot coals, and fire has to burn basically all his nerves off, and he's got blood coming from his mouth, and he's like, oh God, this hurts, it's painful, but I've got to do it, I've got revenge. And bear in mind, he's only got one arm at this point. Well, he's got one arm throughout the rest of the film, hence the title. But he's doing all this, and it's a really painful scene. You can see the pain on his face, and all the while you've got the Shaft music playing. So it does sort of take out some of the drama when, as I say, he's going through this really painful training technique, but at the same time you've got Isaac Hayes' Shaft playing in the background. So it does suck out a bit of the, as I say, the intensity of just learning the crippled fist that he has to do. And when he returns, it's amazing basically, because he's got his left arm. The whole film, Jimmy Wang Yu had to have his right arm sort of behind his back like this, but he's trained his left arm up, and there's an amazing scene when he comes back and they go back to the sort of the tea house, and there's one shot, he punches this guy, and he goes just one punch, and he goes flying out the window onto like the street below. He just one punch and he sends this guy absolutely flying. I absolutely love that. And it's one, like with me, it's always one of them blink and you miss it moments. But if you ever watch this film, or if you've seen it and watch it again, I just loved it when he just punches this guy and he just goes flying out of this tea house, just onto the street below. And I just love it. There's a line I love in this when it says, one of the villains says, "You're back," and Wang Yu replies, "Hell was full, so they kicked me out." I just love that line. Absolutely love it. Even at the end, it was another thing. Even at the end of this film, when he's taking on the bad guys and just getting justice, even at the end, it's not like he's unstoppable. It's not like Jim Wang Yu's trained all this time and he's really sort of He's an absolute master. Now he even at the end he still gets the crap. Jimmy Wang Yu still gets the crap beaten out of him. He gets beaten up really badly at the end, but he prevails, and the film ends straight away as soon as the villains are dead. But he still gets his arse handed to him a bit quite at the end. I mean, overall, One Armed Boxer, fantastic film. It really is a fantastic. It's definitely a classic kung fu movie. It's definitely a classic Jimmy Wang Yu movie. It should be on anyone. It should be in anyone's kung fu collection. Obviously, Wang Yu, like I say, later he never got the high success back that when he was sort of one of the top kung fu stars. But just watch this film and just watch Jimmy Wang Yu at his best, and a classic piece of Hong Kong cinema. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.